Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
Hello, and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader. And joining me, after I clear the phlegm out of my throat, is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on this week? How you doing?
Billy Raids, how you doing, buddy? Trying to stay cool here, pal. It's been a hot week, but it's been crazy heat.
Yeah, well, that's what you get here. It's either
Not
freezing
complaining.
cold or
Not complaining.
flaming heat.
Better than freezing cold, buddy.
I prefer the freezing cold, believe it or not, Sean. I actually do. I don't know why. I think that's just, I don't know. I guess I know a lot of people say they can't wait to move south when they retire. I'm not moving south. I'm staying here. I do not
like. You're going to say you're moving to Canada, watch more hockey.
Maybe I'll do that. Who knows? I wouldn't mind being
All right,
Canadian.
buddy. So before we get to our special guest today, Bill, we got a little bit of a major announcement to make.
Yeah, big announcement. Big.
Huge.
So yeah, we have an exclusive on our Patreon, and of course we've been promoting our Patreon a lot lately, and I would encourage everybody to go there. Just go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, and you'll see our logo. Just click on that. We encourage you to join. We have a very exciting show coming up in August where we are bringing back author David Whalen, who wrote the book Mind Games, The Assassination of John Lennon. And of course, he's been on our show several times talking about his book. And the show that we have coming up is an exclusive Q&A episode. So if you are a Patreon member, you can join anytime between now and then. You have the ability to send us a question to ask David directly. We will do that. We will record an episode with him in August, and your questions will be asked and answered in that episode. So we highly encourage you to join. You can join Patreon for as little as $1 a month. I mean, Sean, I lose $1 a month in change in my car. So we're not asking for that much. I think you can get on there and see we have a lot available. We do, of course, our weekly speakeasy episode where we talk, kind of talk about current events. It's just kind of a off the cuff conversation with Sean and I. But Sean, give us a little bit, just a real quick, because I know we have an important guest to get to. Real quick, just a little bit about David's book, so we can kind of give if you haven't heard our episodes with David, I think we've done 3 or 4 with him. Just give a little preview of the book.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're already a Patreon member, send your questions in, message them to me. But if you're not a Patreon member, sign up for $1 a month and then get your question in. But David's book, I think it's the best book on the John Lennon assassination. I mean, it opened my eyes because remember, Bill, we both of us thought there was nothing there, that it was an open and shut case. And David has really proven that there was a lot more to it, and that Chapman couldn't have done what they said he did. And he talks about all the nefarious people connected to the religious right and to Navy intelligence and to the CIA that were around Chapman. And it's just a fascinating book. So the questions you have about the official story, about who was behind it, questions about Chapman, questions about the the Chapman and visiting Japan in 1978, the same time Lennon was there. I mean, Dave discovered that. I mean, Dave's done a tremendous job. So, any questions you got on the Lennon assassination? Because there was no real investigation. NYPD
Right.
had their guy, and that was it. And they didn't investigate the case.
There was no
And
investigation. There was no trial. It was a joke. So, yeah, but again, it's a Patreon exclusive event. So you need to sign up for
Amen.
Patreon in order to ask the question and have it answered and see the episode. So we encourage you to go to our Patreon, go to patreon.com, search for That's Enough Out of You, and you'll find us. We're the only That's Enough Out of You podcast on Patreon. So look for
Bill,
us.
the last thing, Bill, make sure you get the questions in early. Like start
Yes.
getting them now. So this way, because once we have all the questions, then we could set this up. Because right now there's no date set. It's kind of tentatively set for August, but
Yep.
I mean, we have to get all the questions in and then prep for it and you know, give Dave a heads up and then you know, we'll go from there. So get your questions in as soon as possible.
Absolutely. All right, Sean, let's get to our guest. We have Chris Flynn with us. Chris is an expert in renewable energy, and this is really an exciting topic. For me, this is really an important topic, and I think this is something that we don't talk enough about. We're certainly not on this program, but you know, just in general, you know, there's so much coming from, and honestly, Sean, it again becomes a political issue. I don't know how much we're going to get into that today, but you know, we hear so much BS from the right, about how. Yep. So, Chris, welcome to That's Enough Out of You.
Hey, this is a lot of fun. Good to meet you, Bill. And I've known Sean for a while. I've known his brother for a really long time. So it's great to be
on that, Chris.
What's that?
My condolences. I know. Just kidding.
That's fair. That's a fair comment.
So, Chris, why don't you give us a little bit about your background and
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I always like to tell people that my professional career started off as a banker. So that puts me on the suspect column with you guys right away. And that led me into the software industry, which gave me an opportunity to live in London, England for a couple of years. You know, came back to America, not because I wanted to, but because they kicked me out. But it's been what got me motivated about renewable energy was going to graduate school in 2007 through 2009 to get an MBA. And I was just trying to figure out why there weren't more solar panels on people's houses. Okay. I was thinking, it's a really simple thing. Why aren't there more of them? And so in the course of getting the degree from Penn State University, so I will make a little splash there, you know, one of the things we had to do was create a business and then pitch that business outside of the classroom. So that opportunity to pitch that led to two jobs. My first job in the renewable energy space was with a company, actually a nonprofit here in Allentown, Pennsylvania, called Sustainable Energy Fund. And basically they hired me because I knew about lending. We're in the business of lending money out for renewable energy projects. So they taught me more about renewables. I taught them more about banking. So it was a good matchup. And at the same time, I was also teaching a course, co-teaching a course at Penn State on the World Campus on how to be a renewable energy entrepreneur. So I've been in that space ever since. So I'm guessing it's 15 years now, somewhere in that range. I've been a solar developer. I've been somebody that has guided projects into existence in 7 different states. Currently have a couple of lease options on properties in Pennsylvania to build utility scale solar. So I know a good deal about it. I've done consulting work to help people, especially businesses, try to figure out, how do I do this? What's the best way to do this? What's the smartest way to do this? And it's been fun. It's been interesting. I've also had the great pleasure of walking the hallways of the Pennsylvania legislature, trying to convince legislators to improve the rules in Pennsylvania so that more renewable energy can happen here. It is a dramatic uphill battle, as you might imagine. So in a lot of other states, it has worked out much better than it has here. But in some ways, the state has left itself open to an environment where there are no rules. So it's really kind of fascinating. So that's the history of it. That's how I got here. So I know a good deal about the business side of it. I know a lot about the legislative side of it. And when you're in this space, I've been writing a column on Substack for about 2 years now on all ways that this thing comes together, the environmental side, the history of the environmental side, trying to help people genuinely understand why the Earth is warming. And that there's no grand, well, there may be other conspiracies, but the greenhouse effect is just science, kids.
Right.
And it's either right or wrong.
And Chris, I want to get to JFK and Rachael Carson. I also want to talk about climate change and these idiots saying it's a hoax and stuff. But before we get to that, just give an overall view of what we're facing right now as an energy crisis, and what would you say it's not just an American problem, but it's a global problem?
Yeah, Sean, it's a global problem because we are kicking a ton of carbon into the air every year. It's not going down. It leveled off a little during the pandemic because nobody was going anywhere.
Right.
But at the same time, you have what I like to think of as an entrenched system for how energy gets produced. And this idea of the need for long lines and gigantic power plants and all of that has kind of reverberates around the globe. And so, and the best example might be, currently as African nations are trying to improve their own ability to be in the 21st century and have reliable power grids.
Right.
Even they're getting sucked in by the folks that build coal power plants, because you can't build a coal power plant in the industrialized world right now. It's pretty much impossible. You could not get a new one approved in the United States if your life depended on it. And most of the ones that are up and operating are more than 50 years old. So you have to really think about the nature of the fleet, and it's going away. But the Chinese know more about building coal power plants than anybody, because they build them at a pace that is quite stunning, even though at the same time they're trying to build out their solar and battery world. But so you have this system, and natural gas. I mean, it's interesting in the U.S. Natural gas has replaced coal as the primary power source here. It's not a whole lot cleaner. And it does something that a coal plant never did, which is it leaks. The system and the pipelines leak unburned hydrocarbons into the atmosphere, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. So you think you have a less, you have a nice, just north of Scranton, there's a big, beautiful natural gas power plant in the industrial development there, and it cost about $4.5–5 billion to build that thing. And it's still, it has leakage. It has leakage of natural gas out of it that has not been burned.
Well,
So
Sean and I look out our window and we can see it. So
you can see it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a state-of-the-art facility, and it still has leakage.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's something to think about, right?
Yeah.
And it's also, for the most part, an unmanned facility, right, Chris? I mean,
it's got because of automation, it's got a very low number of people that have to work there.
Yeah.
And so that's just a fact. So what the industry's been able to do with natural gas is it's been able to build these facilities that are nowhere near as big as an old coal plant or a nuclear plant. But they've been able to build a lot more of them. And so I think the mix right now is natural gas across the US probably accounts for just under 50% of all of our electric generation. So it's very significant number. So it's not there, the focus on the shift to renewables just hasn't happened as quickly as it could have or should. And it's slowed up by a couple of things, but it's mostly slowed up by an entrenched behavior in an industry.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, Chris. We recently had a salesman who was trying to sell us solar panels come to our house, and honestly, it was a little shady. The whole interaction. It seemed like and people in our neighborhood were telling each other this is a scam. Don't engage with these people, and really, it did seem like that. And I'm just wondering why is that like, and I know this isn't the only area where that happens. I've seen this in other areas where a lot of times you have these young kids, sometimes right out of college, going door to door trying to sell solar panels that they've contracted with a company or whatever. Why is that? Why don't we have a more reputable?
Well, the system is not, once it's this idea of nobody's put any rules around it. Number one, you have more recourse if you buy a bad car from a used car dealer,
right?
so the battle is people get excited. It's like any kind of sale. People get excited. They're like, oh yeah, and you're going to save all this money. And people don't know anything about the rules surrounding doing that. So the example would be, here's a favorite example of mine. I've never been in residential solar. I don't ever want to be in residential solar because I understand the pitfalls of it. But somebody was asking me about it in a meeting the other day. I said, how long are you going to be in your house? They're like, oh, we don't know. I said, okay, well then don't do it. If you're going to be there for 20 years or more, it's likely a very good deal. But finding somebody reputable to do the installation is critical.
Yeah.
And one of the key things that happens to a lot of people when they go ahead and do one of these projects is that the installer, I'm being kind, doesn't talk about how long it takes to get approval from the utility to hook your system up.
Right.
Okay, because if you're not in the house during the day and you're not cranking the AC and running all your video games, the power usage in that house is really low. So all of that power that solar array is generating is going back into the grid, and the utility is within their full right to whether right there where that solar panel is can handle that impedance. Okay, so the best way to think about this is our entire electric grid was built to be one way. Power going out to the customer. Okay, right. Whether you're a residential customer or industrial customer or whatever, it's designed to go out. Now, in most cases, it has tremendous redundancy, which is why we don't have a lot more power failures. So the redundancy on the system means it can take impedance, it can take backflow. So, but they still going to study, like if 20 people in your neighborhood want to put solar panels on their house, the utility needs to know just how much backflow that's going to cause.
Right, sure.
And that part, I have heard these pitches, and that part of the story is almost never told. It's like, you're going to save a ton of money. Oh, by the way, thanks for deposit, and it's going to be 10 months before you can hook onto the grid.
Yeah.
Yeah. That part is like conveniently neglected.
Right.
It's it'd be like, oh, thanks for the deposit on your car insurance. It'll be 10 months before we'll pay a claim.
Right.
So So it's like a lot of new, newer industries. There's every kind of person in the mix. So that there's scammers out there doesn't shock me at all. I mean, in New Jersey, when the renewable energy certificate values were very high 10 years ago, common term people use for what you're talking about is two chucks in a truck. They would just slam a thing on the side of their pickup saying solar installed, and they would work they would work this scam incessantly. The idea that people still do it and that it's still done on a large scale doesn't shock me, and part of it is that being able to do the measurements for how much solar could go on your house is free. You can go online and do it yourself. There's a website called Energy Sage, and it's got all the data you could ever want. It shows you everybody's house in America has got a photograph from the sky.
Sure. So
it's more fun when you get to talk to a reputable one and they look at your house and you've got dormers and all kinds of things like that. Your irregular roof surface, and a good solar installer will say, "This won't work. There's too much shading."
Right. Yeah.
To the end of the discussion. Like, boom. What do you mean it won't work? It's going to make no, it won't work. So it's hard, and I don't disagree with how hard it is. It's always fascinating. On the commercial side, there's a lot less of that because commercial, business folks, before they move towards something like this, tend to educate themselves. They tend to task somebody internally with what the hell is this and how does it work?
Right. Yeah.
And what's the value? I mean, because it works phenomenally well. It's just making sure it gets installed correctly. Yeah, it's a real problem, and I'm not dismissing it at all.
Yeah. And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah, and there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh my, they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. Again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
We'll start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you. So let's get to JFK and Rachael Carson. So we had Monica Weizak on, and she talked about how JFK was looking for cheap, affordable energy and trying to get, energy sources to low income people. And he stressed the importance of a growing supply of energy. He worried about the environment, protecting the seashores and the wildlife. And, we know that, oil men like the Rockefellers and stuff, they like to drive up the price of like oil and gas and say that there's a shortage. And we know that's a bunch of garbage. But JFK really finds an ally in this, in Rachael Carson. And Rachael Carson was a marine biologist, and JFK loved marine conservation. And Carson was kind of like his muse. And Carson wrote Silent Spring, okay? And she talked about that, about the pesticides and how pesticides were used by soldiers in World War II, and especially DDT, and how DDT was used to kill mosquitoes, and it was actually killing birds. And her work led to a nationwide ban on DDT for agricultural use. So what happens is, like all these truth seekers, Carson comes under attack, and her book was under big chemical companies and their paid assets. And she comes under a massive attack by big chemical companies, and by the anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a known fact that they had a collaborative relationship, and she, the book was really provocative because, basically it's called Silent Spring because she said if we continue down this road, there won't be any birds singing in the springtime anymore. So if you're what's that?
The birds were getting killed.
Yeah. Yeah. So
the birds were getting killed by these pesticides.
That's right. And one of the big things that DDT was doing was making the shell of birds' eggs weaker. The bird in the shell couldn't live to mature, couldn't live long enough to get out of the shell. But it's this pushback against everything that was occurring at that time in terms of this, phenomenal growth of wealth and people wanting to maintain their control of these industries. So her voice in that, and it's even amplified because she becomes part of Kennedy's New Frontier,
right? Because
it is this this concern. They have this joint concern. Obviously, he's a sailor. He's a guy, a lover of the ocean. Sure. So he could certainly see. Right. Yeah, he could see these degradations. He could see them personally, and so the power of it was really fascinating. And he thought very deeply about, as we grow this, this economy and this population, where is this electrical power going to come from that everybody's going to want? Nobody's going to not want it. And so how does that, how do you evolve it in a safe way, in a way that isn't dangerous? I mean, you don't, if you look at just look at the history of the Lackawanna Valley. I mean, you can see the damage of coal every day, and that, so there is, I was pointing out a site to somebody who wanted to think about a large solar array near Carbondale, and near the intersection of Old Route 6 and the bypass. Right. There's a, I think it's 7-story tall pile of coal tailings.
Yep.
And it's still susceptible to catching on fire as the old ones that used to burn for decades.
Wow.
So you still have this, this dismissive attitude about these really dangerous things. So it's really fascinating that Kennedy was thinking about it, and I'm always intrigued when people talk about, well, solar, solar, photovoltaics. That's like a really new idea. No, it's not. They invented the solar cell in 1954. So, right. at Bell Labs of all places, right? So it is there is this connection of people who are trying to see, if you go back to that late 50s, early 60s, those people like Rachael Carson who were saying this future is not going to work. We're going to need a different one.
Right.
And it is not, the pushback is intense. It's intense.
And one of the things about Carson is she was suffering terribly with cancer, really bad. And the way the media and the chemical companies would attack her is they would say, that, oh, she's dying of cancer and she's blaming it on the pesticides and this and that. And that was just awful, and she actually had a relationship with Jackie Kennedy too. She met with Jackie Kennedy. Jackie Kennedy invited her to the White House, to the Women's Committee and for the New Frontier. And she met with Jackie, and she had Rachael Carson had a tremendous influence on JFK. And another thing was, Carson worried about the effects of the nuclear arms race, with the Soviet Union. And, from 1945 to 1960, there was a string of detonations that Carson brought up, and it was killing the oceans. And, when Kennedy signs that limited test ban treaty with the Soviets, that really made Carson a believer in Kennedy and really made her happy. But, we know what happened. Kennedy's assassinated and Carson dies from cancer a short time after, in 64, I believe she died.
Yeah, I think so. 64, 65. Yeah.
And Kennedy's always said that the military is the biggest polluters there is. And he was a military man, so he knew, the effects of the negative effects that they have on the environment. So I just think this whole thing with Rachael Carson, her book, Silent Spring, and it's up on her bookshop. People could get that on her bookshop. I think it's an important book, even now, that people should really read, because it's really affecting what's going on now.
Yeah, no, I think it's super useful. And I think because when we were talking about doing this, I kept doing, I was trying to go chronologically through different phases of pushback against this whole story. And obviously one of the more recent ones that people, cite with some regularity is here's a quiet little science guy working away at NASA's office in New York City in the late 1980s. And he just keeps seeing scarier and scarier data about the world's warming. And his name is James Hansen. He's still alive today. And his initial report in 1988, he said that over the next 20 years, we would have a series of the hottest years that have ever occurred. That it was because of how carbon dioxide was building up in the atmosphere, causing a greenhouse effect, which the greenhouse effect was discovered in 1856. So it's not like, oh, this is all new. Where did this come from? But we know, I mean, anybody that knows anything about Hansen never imagined he would be vilified by people because of his position. Right. It never even crossed his mind. It's on a scale or a level sometimes that's been similar to public health people during the pandemic who are getting death threats. What the heck is that about?
Right, sure.
So here's people who are, science people just looking at the facts, they're looking at the hard science, and they're going, oh, wow. And the one thing that Hansen's prediction is more dire than what's actually occurred so far, but it was because he didn't believe that we could cut down on ozone pollution, that we would knock the carbofluorides out of the emission world. So, but that did happen. It has been significant and valuable, and it has probably slowed down the pace a little bit. We're still living in a world where the ocean is absorbing 90% of the heating that we are causing.
Do you need a new roof? Are you looking to repair damage to an existing roof? Call the roofing professionals at Quality Roofing Express. Located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Quality Roofing Express is a certified Owens Corning contractor. We are an independent, family-owned business connecting with our community and providing quality work. Our expert team can install metal roofs, rubber roofing, or traditional asphalt shingles. Do you need chimney flashing? How about a new skylight to increase your home's value and let that natural sunlight in? At Quality Roofing Express, we do it all, even siding. Check out our website, qualityroofingexpress.net, or visit us on Facebook. Give us a call at 570-614-3914 for a free estimate today. Quality Roofing Express. We put a roof over your head. DK's Corner has moved. Come see us in our brand new location at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, right across from the Jessup Plaza. Enjoy a brand new menu with hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, delicious breakfast, including breakfast bowls and sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's famous Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos, and still the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. And DK's Corner now has beautiful outdoor seating for the summer. Don't feel like leaving the house? Call DK's Corner for delivery. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. DK's Corner, now in Jessup, Pennsylvania. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Case Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Case Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Case Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support.
Well, Chris, let's talk about, so one of the things we try to do on this podcast is we try to take out the political aspect of these things. We try not to get involved, but sometimes you can't. And we know that there's extremists on the right wing that just they're out there saying that climate change is a hoax and this and that. Let's talk about the effects of climate change and what's happening right now.
Sure. I mean, we're living a moment right now, right? So it's, I was watching the news this morning. It's going to be 100 degrees in Philadelphia today. All right. So is it unusual for Philly to get to 100 degrees in the summertime? No. But in June, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so this heat dome effect is happening simply because of the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So it's simple. It's really simple science. If you pay attention, the radiation and light from the sun hits the earth and then it bounces off of the surface here. So in order for us to maintain this livable space that we all enjoy, there has to be a certain amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to keep all the heat from escaping. So if you had an atmosphere with no carbon dioxide in it, the average temperature of this planet would be about 20 degrees below zero. So that would be uncomfortable for all of us.
Yeah.
But so the natural system has evolved in a way that you have a certain level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is great. But we have been compounding that level for a century. And as it begins to accelerate, it just means that more and more of that radiation, that I think it's low frequency radiation, can't get back into space. Because what carbon dioxide does is it doesn't block any of the energy from coming in, it just blocks it from going out, just like a just like a greenhouse. I mean, it's not,
Right,
that's why they
sure.
call it the greenhouse effect. So you have, as you know, every day we're just dumping more of it into the atmosphere. Just it just continues without abatement,
Right.
and it's being caused primarily, you know, it's not being caused by, you know, volcanoes we can't find. It's being caused very simply by the action of burning fossil fuel. And burning the, you know, think about, you know, here's a way to think about it from you know, trying to teach kids about how plants create oxygen. So plants create oxygen, and they literally pull the CO2, the carbon dioxide, they pull it out of the air, and they store it in the tree. They store it in the leaves, they store it in the trunk of the tree. So it's stored in the tree. Most of the fossils that produce fossil fuel are plants, not dinosaurs. Plants.
Right.
Okay, so here are these plants which have, you know, been, you know, forced down through the way the earth evolves, and so the carbon dioxide that they captured, we are now pushing back into the atmosphere at a phenomenal rate, because we're taking that old captured carbon. Basically what we're doing, we're taking all this ancient billions of year old captured carbon and driving it back into the atmosphere at a pace that the ecosystem is not designed to handle.
Mm.
Right.
And Chris, is that why we are seeing so much of this frequent extreme weather?
Yeah.
It's just, it seems like we have these amazing, you know, hurricanes and tornadoes and
Right.
and you know, extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme rain. You know,
Yeah,
these.
the biggest example, Bill, is the extreme rain. That's the
Yeah.
one that is most, you know, in a way, probably the most frightening one of the bunch.
Right.
Okay, because what's happening, as you heat the atmosphere, it holds more moisture. Okay, the hotter atmosphere is holding more moisture. It's holding more
Right.
moisture, and then at some point in time, it just lets go.
Mm.
And where it lets go is totally unpredictable.
Yeah.
So the example being, you know, was it last year or last year in New Hampshire, in Vermont, okay, they get, you know, 6 inches of rain in a day. Boom.
Wow.
Nothing that we would. And can you predict where that's going to happen? Our science is not that good yet, so we cannot predict where we can't predict where that's going to happen. It's really similar to, you know, the tornadic activity lasting longer and being more unpredictable in where it's going to occur, because you have this heating of the atmosphere, you know, and so you get this moisture laden atmosphere that at some point in time lets go, and it can let go very violently, and it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't necessarily happen over a broad space. You know, it's similar to, you know, how does it look in the wintertime? In the wintertime, you got a similar circumstance, and you get super heavy snow, like for 10 miles, and then nothing.
Right.
So you get that kind of effect. So that effect will, as the planet gets warmer, and I need to let you guys know something. Even if we stopped all carbon pollution tomorrow, this effect is going to continue to ramp, and it will probably continue to
Wow.
ramp. If we could stop all production tomorrow, we're still going to continue to warm for another century.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
you can't. Can you hold it below a certain level? Probably, yes. But the need is dramatic. It's really dramatic.
Yeah.
And we're going to see things, you know, like these extended heat waves right now here in the United States, because we have so much electrical infrastructure, and it is really pretty darn good. people are gonna be able to run their AC. I've had my AC cranking this last week, and it's a comfy 72 degrees in here. So, and that part of our equation we're not really thinking about, because the heat is putting tremendous stress on that system. And if it breaks down over a large chunk of our population, for whatever reason, and you have a blackout that lasts days or weeks, you'll see what happened in the northwestern part of our country, where people don't have air conditioning as a rule. When they had these 100-degree temperatures, lots of people died, and the same thing will happen. You'll have a lot of people die because there's no way to cool off.
Right.
And we have a very narrow range of what kind of core temperature we can deal with and still survive. So the need, when I look at the energy side of this, the need to have a lot more of it that is renewable and localized is critical, because you're going to want to be able to maintain that system through these difficult scenarios. So just the science is super simple. Why people, whatever the mechanisms are, I don't always appreciate it, because I think I was taught that science is really important and you should pay attention to. And that to get a PhD in climatology or astrophysics, I know I'm not up to that. So somebody that has what it takes to complete that, they might be an egomaniac, but they know their stuff.
Right.
And so they're worth listening to.
And then, Chris, we know that that we've been hearing that the ocean levels are rising at a far greater pace than than they ever had. I mean, ultimately, with the warming temperatures, with the water levels rising, that's going to wreak havoc on our ecosystem. It already has,
it already has, and it'll get worse. I mean, the biggest, I always say there's two big existential threats. Okay, one is one of the massive ice shelves in Antarctica, that if it lets loose, it's going to take a long time for it to melt, but there's enough water there to raise sea levels by 10 feet. And the other one is if a big chunk of the Greenland ice sheet goes. The way I think about it, there was a great documentary on PBS, I think about a decade and a half ago. And it was these guys investigating Greenland. And normally Greenland in the summertime, the pack ice there is miles high, so it's phenomenal. And normally in the summertime, you have some open ponding on the top of that thing on some prolonged period of days in the 60s and 70s, where the temperature drops off at night very dramatically, so that doesn't continue. So the big reason why these ice places can and might melt and become really problematic is because the normal, and this is part of the greenhouse effect, the normal drop off in temperature that occurs overnight is not happening.
Wow. Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you have more and more days where that temperature drop is not significant, then the melting continues to occur overnight.
Wow.
Okay. So this documentary from 20 years ago, they were there in September, so the end of summer, and there was something none of them had ever seen, which was basically rivers running across the top of the glacier.
Wow.
Wow.
So you have to go, oh wow, that's not good. So what I always like to say we are highly adaptive as a species. We have adapted to climate all over the world. And do we have a substantial opportunity to survive? Yes. But the argument should always be that the investment that would be needed to stop this progression, it is astronomical, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what it will cost if you just let it go.
Right. Sure.
Okay. And so that there, the Paris Accords, all of that, there certainly is a framework there that people can work towards to make this so. And I think the other thing that's going to happen pretty rapidly over the next decade will be young people suing us.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And saying, I deserve a future and you are taking it from me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. There was a case one in Hawaii last year, 2 months ago, where a group of young people got together, sued the state of Hawaii for taking away their future because of carbon buildup.
Wow.
And they
Wow.
won. And they won. It's
Yeah.
the first time somebody like that has won. So
Wow.
it's this idea that, Greta Thunberg, a couple of years ago, she when she figures out how bad it is, she creates a little poster for herself. She goes and sits outside of the government house there, and it says, "Why should I bother going to school? I have no future."
Yeah. And of course, she was ripped apart by the right.
Absolutely, of course, yeah. I mean, she's reviled. There's really grotesque things said about her,
You know,
and it is just this. I think part. I mean, I'm not going to dive into politics, but there's always a great sense of wanting to maintain some status quo, and not knowing that. I don't mean to be mean, but we've already lost the status quo.
right.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's already
Yeah.
gone. It's
Yeah.
gone. And until we become super conscious of it, we're just the slide will continue. And I it's a fascinating time. And I had a conversation with somebody about a month ago who's been in the renewable space for a really long time, and he's about 80 years old. And I said to him, I said, are you retiring anytime soon? And his response to me was simple. He goes, have we fixed climate change?
Wow.
Wow.
Well, Chris, let me ask you, a little bit about the Biden, clean energy bill, and then of course what we're trying to do statewide in Pennsylvania with some of the bills that have been introduced. Do those go far enough? Like, in your opinion, what are going to be the impact of those bills, particularly here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I think here in Pennsylvania the battle is. Pennsylvania had one of the first portfolio standards in the country. So it's saying X amount of energy has to come from renewable sources. So a modest one set in motion by Governor Rendell. And the reason it worked was because, my hat is off to him continuously, because he was a really good horse trader. He was a politician that knew he had to interact with his opposition.
Sure.
And do it privately and forcefully, and he did it very, very well. But Pennsylvania has had a one-term Republican governor who really didn't care about the portfolio standard,
Right.
and it had a two-term Democratic governor really didn't know how to horse trade. So I think we have a governor now that does know how to horse trade.
Yeah.
So we will see if the state house passed the bill to allow for community solar, which is a whole other podcast, by the way. But an effort to increase the amount of renewable energy being generated in the state. It is sitting in committee on the Senate side. I know traditionally in Pennsylvania, having spent a lot of time in Harrisburg, that until the budget gets passed, very few other things are even contemplated. And because this is an election year, I don't know how well if it can move out of the committee in September or October, I'd be very surprised. But there is a fair amount of movement. The governor is very committed. I think he will figure out a way. I think he might figure out a way next year to pull off a horse trade to get that ball rolling. And it would be the first time in, it's 20 years. We're 20 years into the current portfolio standard here.
Right.
And that's, it's really crazy. So it's a political, hard to know thing. The only thing that has happened on a positive side here is, and this is because there are no rules, there is probably 4 to 6 gigawatts of utility scale solar. So solar arrays that on average consume 300 to 500 acres of property. These utility scale solar projects are moving ahead. It's taking time because of how the queuing process for all that works, but a very large chunk of that will come online in the next 2 years. I think people will be surprised by just how much of it there is that's coming at us. And that's been a result of the fact, there's a handful of counties in the state that have countywide ordinances on how these things get built. So in most cases, it's up to the local jurisdictions to figure out rules because there are none. And that has been that's a point of contention. So the best way to think about neighboring state, New Jersey, which has a very impressive alternative energy portfolio standard, has updated that standard 5 times in the last 20 years.
Wow.
5 times.
Wow.
So it's a fascinating difference, and Maryland is probably got the most aggressive drive towards renewables of any state in the country. So you have so statistically right now 23 states have some kind of favorable view. Probably about 10 are what I would call neutral, and the rest are relatively hostile.
And we
Chris,
probably
that
don't
include-
have to.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the South, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm always fascinated by is that the state that has the most battery backup power in the country is Texas. The state that most days when it's windy is producing 50% of its power from wind resources. It has a very fast growing solar resource there as well, is Texas. and it is, it's a pretty red state, and the more fun one to me is that because of the rule changes, the investment tax credit and the other things related to Inflation Reduction Act, most of the battery plants and new solar manufacturing plants are being built in red states where very few legislators, to none, voted for these laws to occur, but they're getting millions and in some cases billions of dollars of investment coming at them as a result. Probably Georgia and North Carolina being the most well served. So it's kind of a
Yeah.
it's just a funny mix, it's like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who thinks that all this is evil, she might end up with a gigantic battery plant in her jurisdiction, in her district. I tend to think this way about this whole revolution. It is not happening anywhere near as fast as it has to. So it's understanding, what do you want to deal with? Some discomfort now, or unbelievable discomfort later.
Yeah.
Sure. Right.
Well,
Yeah.
of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks that at night, if you have solar energy, you won't have power at night. So that just
there
goes
you
to
go.
show you the mentality there.
That's right.
And I'm just, to me, it's fascinating that this is a political issue to begin with. I mean, it's,
Right.
it should just be common sense. But, of course,
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a political issue here than anywhere else in the world.
sure. And
By
I wanted,
far, by far.
I wanted to ask you about that too, Chris.
Yeah.
Who, as far as worldwide, what countries
Right.
would you say are the leaders in renewable energy?
The leaders would be, I would put Portugal and Spain high on the list. Germany is high on the list.
Sure.
Certainly, Denmark will probably reach 100% renewable generation real soon.
Wow.
England, Great Britain has, the UK has been in a massive wind development space. And what's always interesting to me, there was all this discussion of, just investigating the windmills off of the Jersey coast has led to whales dying. Nothing's been built, nothing's been put in place, nothing. But in the North Sea off of the UK, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of wind turbines.
Right.
There's no evidence that it's destroyed the fishery at all.
Right.
So it's it's how is your information getting filtered? But in the UK, they're determined. I think they're very close to not having a single coal-fired power plant running by the end of the decade. That's extraordinary.
That's amazing.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So and that it's been a conservative government there for over a decade.
Yeah.
That is capable of a lot of other stupid things, but this on this, regardless of political affiliation, people agree.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with the importance of science-based education.
Right.
Education is the key, right? Exactly.
Education is always the key to this.
Yep.
And getting, and that will continue to be true. And you just have to, I think, I'll put it to you this way. I don't know anybody that's worked in renewable energy that isn't like an insane optimist. We all are. It's our nature as people.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me on a call the other day, yeah, you're optimist to the point of being delusional. But without that level of optimism, all that has been occurring would not be occurring.
Sure.
And so do I think that there is enough, there are, just because of the tax credit that the Biden administration got passed, this tax credit has caused hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars to already be committed to these projects. These are large companies. These are all of the largest banks in the United States that are engaged in this space. I think, regardless of what happens in November, I don't think it stops. I think it could be slowed. I think it could be banged around a little bit, but please tell me somebody that wants a new coal plant in their backyard.
Right.
Yeah.
Please
Chris,
introduce.
You mentioned the countries that are best at it. What's the countries that are worst? What countries are totally ignoring this space?
Well, Russia.
Yeah.
Right.
As an example, virtually
What about
nowhere.
France? What about France?
Well, France is always an interesting topic to me because they're very engaged, but they've run the safest nuclear power program in the world for 70 years.
Right.
There's never been an accident. and it generates over 70% of all their power.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Okay, so it's
Okay.
significant, and they have, they have handled all the material in a safe and reasonable way, as reasonable as you can do. But the motivation was, at the time, France's motivation to do this was to say, we don't want to be holding to someone else's oil or coal supply to generate power here.
Right.
Yeah.
So they knew the science, and what they did was they created a design that works. And what's fascinating to me is their whole approach to their nuclear fleet is identical to how Admiral Rickover created the nuclear navy in the United States. So very strict rules that have to be followed with consistency so that accidents don't happen. And I used to work for a guy who was a nuclear submariner who ran the nuke plant on a submarine. And he said, it's all, he goes, I said, what happens when you don't follow the rules? He goes, well, they do have permission to shoot you. I said, on a submarine? He goes, yeah, that's a really bad idea, right? But the point being, that was how they were trained. That's how they trained these people.
Wow.
And so the French government's approach has been to do this at a certain level that is consistent, and to make improvements continuously over the arc of time. So they do it better than anybody. They run these plants with great efficiency. They're really exceptional.
What about a country you mentioned earlier, China?
So China has a mixed record here. China is the world's largest producer of solar panels by far, and they are installing solar and wind at a greater pace than any country in the world. But they built this phenomenal industrial base on their ability to put up, at times they were building 20, 30 coal plants a week.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're still the largest importer of U.S. coal in the world.
Right.
I would guess more than a third of our coal goes to China.
Wow.
So you have this duality there. I have a good friend, a Chinese friend who's a Chinese national. She's lived in here for a long time. And I was talking to her about it, and she's in the solar industry, and she said, well, you had to figure that China's trying to figure out, how do we move away from coal production? Well, because it's killing our workers.
Yeah.
The motivation was simple. If you're killing the worker, you're not going to be able to do other things.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
right.
very, very practical.
Yes.
Nothing to do with it's creating toxic atmosphere.
Right.
And India's in a similar spot, which is it is trying to push ahead with renewables at a phenomenal pace, but people live in these crowded cities that have there's no air pollution controls on cars, and and more importantly, a lot of motorcycle engines. I mean, motorcycle engines in the United States don't have any pollution on them. So imagine a place where there's millions of them.
Wow.
So you create this insanely toxic atmosphere as a result. So you're trying to move, but you're limited by geography, by infrastructure, all of that. I mean, here in the United States, and certainly in Canada, as an example, we may not have quite enough infrastructure, but we completely have the ability to make this move. There's no new technology required. Right. So this ability to move on this is very real here, and it's very doable. It's going to cost some money, and
Sure.
And people are going to have to just accept that fact. But it can occur And it could occur over the next 10 or 15 years if we really stay at it. So kind of a fun spot to be in, guys.
That's Enough Out of You is sponsored by Carfecta, Scranton's premier destination for finding the vehicle of your dreams. With a commitment to service, value, and selection, Carfecta is your trusted partner in every step of your auto purchase journey. Our sales staff will work with you to select the perfect vehicle from our diverse inventory. Our friendly office staff will assist you in securing financing and offering warranties. At Carfecta, our dedicated team is here to make your car buying experience seamless and satisfying. Located in Scranton, Pennsylvania at 220 South 7th Avenue, or call us at 272-770-0080 and check us out on Facebook. With years of experience serving the area, our dealership is dedicated to offering high-quality pre-owned vehicles to our customers. From the moment you walk through our door, we're committed to providing you with a great car buying experience. With our skilled sales staff and financing options, we'll help you get the vehicle you want at the great price you deserve. Visit Carfecta today and let us exceed your expectations. Are you thinking about selling your house? Well, Bob Connors, a realtor at Christian Saunders Real Estate, says, I can't sell your house, but I sure as heck can market it and get it from sell to sold. Call Bob today for great marketing and to get a ton of eyeballs on your house. Are you in the market to buy a home? Not sure where to start? If it looks like something you shouldn't buy, Bob's going to tell you that. Think you can't buy a house or have no idea where to start? Been there, done that. Bob will get you going in the right direction. You can reach Bob at 570-614-3624 or 570-335-9000. And you can find Bob on Facebook at Bob Connors-Realtor. Whether you call Bob or not, please remember, stay awesome, all you awesome humans, and be kind to each other. Bob Connors, the realest real estater. And thanks to Bob Connors and Christian Saunders Real Estate for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You.
Well, you talked to Chris about, the funding and the resources that these states are getting and different things. And you talk about government agencies, working on this, but the problem is some of these, they have limited oversight. The money, the way the money's being spent, it doesn't go to where it's supposed to go. You get politicians, what happens. It's a big problem.
Yeah. And I think, Sean, part of the problem that I've seen personally is, there's a tremendous amount of money that's focused on things that may not work very well. So I can be a critic of this to the extent that the EPA is funding a program called Solar for All, and it's probably virtually impossible to make it happen, because what they're suggesting is that low to moderate income homeowners have solar put on their roof. Right. And we were talking where we were circling back to where we were having the conversation about the con men.
Right. Yeah.
So you could now have this, and I've had these discussions where, Pennsylvania has gotten a big chunk of money to do this. Okay.
Right.
And it's coming through the Department of Environmental Protection, and it's also being funded in part through the Philadelphia Energy Authority. So they're working in conjunction to kind of figure out how to make this happen. But there's not enough trained installers, number one. There's just about, if you look at all the rooftops across the state that they would want to put these things on, every single one of them, to handle the load that comes off of that array, is going to need a service upgrade. So to be fair, if you want to put solar panels on your roof, you want a 440 system, not a 220 system.
Right.
Okay. So you need that ability to handle that extra, that power flow when it's going in the opposite direction. And so we don't have enough electricians to do that. Okay.
Right.
So there are these really crazy squeeze spots. So yeah, there's a lot of money in play and a lot of money going out. And I think that there's institutions that are going to grab some of that money and say, we've hired staff, we've been trying to figure out how to make this happen, but we can't. But they still spent the money. So
Well,
there's
that's the thing. I mean, you're basically pouring all this money into something that can't be done. You mean, where's all the money going to? It's not going where it's supposed to.
right.
Well,
So go ahead. Sorry. Go, Bill.
No, I'm just going to say that was the big sales pitch. When these salesmen came, that there was because of all this funding, because of all this government funding, there'd be nothing out of pocket. And I said, how is that possible? How when you hear nothing out of pocket, that's the first red flag.
That's the first red flag, and it's also this. So I can tell you that there are lease programs for people to put solar on the roof of their house. They're hard to qualify for, number one. And secondly, they're not going to be available to everyone. I mean, just because of location and a bunch of other reasons. And I had a meeting with I've met a couple of guys at a networking event. They're really dedicated, trying to be good stewards trying to do it, not be the con men, but the good guys out there talking to people about solar. And always when I sit down with people who have invited me to talk about that, I always say, well, do you understand how these things get financed? And they're like, that was the first, they're like, it was really hard.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that conversation a lot. And because I know how difficult it is. And so when somebody talks to you about installing solar on the roof of your house, I would just always say, what's the cash price?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the cash price.
Yeah.
So Chris, that's one of the major problems with all of this is the access for lower income people to have solar energy and affordable energy.
Yeah, and the smarter way to do it, Sean, to be fair, is for us to figure out how to do community solar.
Right.
Okay. Where everybody where a lot of more people can get a piece of the action, and where it's causing more of the generation that's occurring to be coming from a renewable source. Right. So that in the states where that works pretty well, it's pretty effective, because in most cases, like in New York has a mandate where 30% of the power from a community solar array has to go to low to moderate income homeowner or low to moderate income people.
Yeah.
So you don't even have to be a homeowner. You can be living in an apartment somewhere. You can, whatever your story is. So you can, it's a smarter route. Can Pennsylvania get over that hump? I don't know. I just don't know. I think we could not have a better governor to try and make that push through than we do right now. Yeah. To be very fair, he's got what it takes. Right. And if he can't succeed, I don't know what to think. But I don't think he succeeds in this calendar year. But yeah, I mean, Sean, you go right to the problem, which is, I always tell people that the renewable energy industry in the United States exists because of government largesse, government throwing money at the business and government throwing tax credits at it and all kinds of things of that nature. So,
sure.
And what that causes is people with deep pockets then see, oh, that's an investment where I can make money because the government is de-risking it in a big way.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And so it's a matter of how do we control, and who do we put in charge of controlling how that money gets put out in the field.
Exactly.
And I think that a lot of times it's the way I always go back to 2009. Congress has this great idea called the Recovery Act. It gets passed, gets put into motion. It creates the first real stimulus for the renewable energy space. And one of the big motivators at that point in time was that local businesses would then be able to go to their bank and say, I want to put solar panels on the roof of my business, and I can get a 30% grant from the federal government to make this happen. Can you finance the rest of this thing? And 9 times out of 10, the bank said, no, I don't even know what it is. I don't even know how it works. Why would I even bother to finance that? And that sounds risky. And in the wake of the financial crisis, I'm not about to do anything risky.
Sure.
So, but other entities like utilities, big banks, hedge funds, they all look at this 30% cash grant and they go,
Sure.
how can we get that?
Yeah, exactly.
And they come up with this mechanism called the power purchase agreement, which allows them to own the power generation and just sell you the electricity.
Right.
All right. And they get the cash because they own the generation system.
Mm.
So in the period of time when that tax grant was available, 70% of it went to billionaires.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So, and I often think, I don't even think that it was nefarious on the part of Congress. I think Congress said, well, this would be, someone said, this would be a great deal for small businesses. Yeah. But they didn't think about the other story, which
Right.
was here are all these community banks that are scared to death by the financial crisis. They're not
Right.
going to do something new and interesting. They're just not going to bother.
Right.
And I had, dozens of conversations with them back then, because we were lending money into these programs, and because we were a fund that knew about renewable energy, so we knew what we were doing. But the banks were like, "How does that work?" Well, you get the grant. They get the grant money, and they pay the loan down with it. Oh, really? So this, guys, I will always go back to, how do you educate people? How do you just keep educating them and educating them and educating them to understand what's going on?
That's the key.
Take the politics out of this. This should not be a political issue whatsoever.
This should not be a political issue
Sure.
at all.
Of course not.
At all.
Of course not.
Not at all. Not at all.
Not at all.
Like everything
Not at
else, it's got to be, it's got to be one extreme or the other. That's one of the major problems with America. Is it's got to be taken either the left or the right, all the way, to the extreme. And this this is a common sense, should have nothing to do with politics.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think it should have anything to do with politics. It should be just, here's the reality.
Right.
And here is a solution.
If there's anything both sides should agree on, it should be this.
It should be this. It should absolutely be this.
Exactly.
And I don't know whether we have a big, come to Jesus moment here at some point in time, which could happen. I don't know that it will. But that could be the only potential motivator that I could see to make that happen. Unless we have a real, not in, it's almost, what did something Thomas Jefferson talked about, the blood of patriots and dictators. So you have to, if we're lucky, we get to be at a place in time where we get to rethink democracy.
Well, Chris, maybe we should take Jesus out of this equation, because
absolutely,
something that the right wing don't understand, the right religious right wing, is that not everybody in this country is a Christian, and they don't seem to understand.
Right. And so it's this. If you have this lack of desire to want to understand science, that's really hard.
Well,
I always say people have to agree to all science or no science.
Well, I think you got to look and do your research too, because you got to remember that, when you're talking about funding and stuff, a lot of times scientists could be persuaded just like anybody else.
Sure. Absolutely.
Media, when they're getting funded to say something, they're going to say what the person funding them wants them to say. So you got to look out for that too. You have to do your own research, but something like this to me is common sense. I just don't understand the problem here.
I don't get it. I truly don't get it. It's like, I said to somebody the other day, living in the Lehigh Valley, for the last 12 years, we've had what I call, 2.5 real winters here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I live in a neighborhood that has a lot of, very nice pre-World War II brick homes. Okay. None of them were built with central air.
Right.
And even into the 60s, none of them were built with central air.
Yeah. I mean, look at our winter here in Northeast PA, the last couple, Billy. I mean, how many really big snowstorms did we have?
Not many.
Compared to if you think about the 90s, the early 90s, all the big storms we had.
Yeah.
You don't see that.
Yeah. So the evidence is all around us.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's constant. One of my grew up in the Poconos, and the idea of there being any kind of extended tick season when I was a little kid it didn't happen.
Right.
It got the winter got too cold, or it got too cold at night for those ticks to be able to keep moving around.
Yeah.
So you could. I mean, I grew up in a pretty rural place, and I never had a tick. I can't imagine the same thing being said today, because
it's crazy. Yeah. You're always having to check. Always.
Yeah. So there's been, significant change, and the one that should be, a big one that people should really kind of pay attention to in my, over the last 50, 60 years, we have these, the Great Lakes used to freeze in the wintertime.
Right.
So you would have early in the year lake effect snow, but you never had lake effect snow in late January, because the lakes were frozen. There was no moisture for the wind to pick up.
Sure.
So if that doesn't kind of make you go, huh, something's going on here.
Yeah.
That should that should be an influencer. But yeah, weather extremes, all these things, they should be, things to make us sit up and pay attention.
Absolutely.
And it needs to, does it require generational change? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm not, it's like one of my favorite things about renewability and sustainability is people doing, weatherization of people's houses. And when the weatherization, assistance program was created in the Carter administration, the goal was to over a 10 or 15 year period to not only weatherize people's houses, but bring them up to standard, and or move those people out of substandard housing into modern housing.
Right.
Weatherization assistance program is still going strong 50 years later. Okay. And the reason is we have not, we have not eliminated the problem. The problem is really simple. It's called poverty.
Right.
So as a society, we like to keep sticking our finger in the dike. Oh, that'll hold for a while. Yeah. This is a good issue.
Instead of addressing the real problem.
Instead of addressing the underlying problems.
Exactly.
And so we, as we have to adapt to a changing planet, there's going to be a lot of disruption. It's going to be pretty extraordinary.
Sure.
And a reactionary approach to it is not going to succeed. Just isn't.
Yeah.
No, definitely
Agreed. Well, Chris, this has been phenomenal. I know we've kept you
a
long
okay.
time here. Anything,
So-
before we go, is there anything else that you want to talk about? Any other message that you have for our listeners?
Just we have this thing called the internet. We have this thing called ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever you want to call it. That I would personally love to spend time just telling people about the science.
Yeah.
The science, just understand the science of global warming, understand why it's occurring.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't try to do anything else. Just try to understand the science, because, and when you can, I had a birthday party at my house here like 6-7 years ago, and one of my friends I love him to death, but he's way to the right, and another one of my friends is a scientist. He's and the scientist guy builds the machines that pull oxygen and hydrogen out of the air and turn them into liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. So these companies, Air Liquide, a couple others that make these basically air, it's an air distillery is how this thing works. And so you have to know the exact ratio of the elements in the atmosphere at that location to know how to set this, to turn it on so it starts working. And he said to my friend, who was kind of doing the usual, well, it's probably just the planet getting warmer because the sun's getting, the usual unbelievable
Right. Sure.
stuff.
Yep.
And he said, and he goes, what? And he didn't know my friend's politics, the science guy. He goes, well, let me explain it to you. And he said, I've been building these machines all over the world for 25 years. And here's how it works. It does this, you get, and you create this column of air that's descending, and it gets colder, and these things separate out. And he said, but you have to you got to know the oxygen level, the hydrogen level, the carbon dioxide level, and you have to make sure the machine is properly calibrated. Because every time we recalibrate the machine, we've been seeing with the carbon dioxide has been increasing.
Right.
Wow.
It is in all that time, we've never had a year where it dropped.
Wow.
So, and as my friend's like, well, he goes, so the only thing large enough that's occurring around the planet to make that happen is us pushing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It's the only thing. There's nothing else. So if there's a purely mechanical thing which we all benefit from every frickin' day.
What did the other guy say?
He said, well, what if the science is wrong? He's like, well, if the science is wrong, the machine doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah. See, the problem is that people can't take the politics out. People would rather listen to Taylor Greene than listen to somebody who's been in the field for 25, 30 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To the point. So here's somebody with no political axe to grind, just wanting to explain the science to somebody.
Right.
And so he said, well, what if your science is wrong? He says, my science is wrong. The machine doesn't work. And my friend Kevin, who's explaining this, he goes, the machine doesn't work and I get fired.
Yeah.
So I better make sure I get the science right.
Yeah.
So to me, it's always this, when people will say, oh, things used to be better. I'm like, really? Really? How's that? How are things better? It's like, you have if you're in a car accident, and unless the car accident kills you, and you live in civilization, you have a really good chance of surviving that car accident that 30 years ago, you were done.
Right.
Yeah.
You were done. You were history.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so these things that have evolved and changed are because of improvements in understanding all these things.
Right.
And if I want to fault anybody, I'll fault the educational system for not just banging this into people's heads like really hard.
Yeah. Another
And-
failure of academia.
Yeah, it truly is. It truly is, and it is. But when you get a chance in the modern world here, I've had this opportunity a couple times to be in a grade school or middle school classroom. A lot of those kids, they know this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of these 13-year-olds, they will say, "Why haven't you fixed it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why haven't you fixed it?" Like,
Yeah.
golly, I don't know. I guess we're idiots.
The shoe fits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's will, it's education. But I think the educational piece, guys, is the one I will just always go back to.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
agree. I
We
agree.
gotta learn. We gotta learn.
Yeah. No
So
question.
thanks. This has been a blast.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
Yeah.
real eye opener, Chris. I hope people, really take everything you said here to heart with this episode, because this was fantastic.
Yeah.
yeah, appreciate
I
it.
really enjoyed it.
All right.
All right,
So
Chris.
take care, guys. Thanks so much.
All right.
See ya.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Night, everybody.
Bye-bye. That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.